Okay, thank you very much. This is big stuff, and we appreciate you being here. Late last night and early today, at my direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela.
For more than a century, America has shaped the world, not just with a power, but with a stories. Stories of freedom, stories of protection, stories of necessity. Every time America attacked a country or carried out an operation, there was always a justification. Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, the communist domino effect in Vietnam, protecting American lives in Panama, spreading democracy in Libya. But outside the United States, much of the world saw something else. Power, control, resources. Yet there was always a mask. A story that made power look moral, a justification that made interventions look necessary. But this time there is no mask, it is said openly, very directly. No pretense of spreading democracy, no dramatic speeches about human rights, no emotional appeal about saving people, just interest. For years, America justified intervention by pointing to dictatorships, crime against humanity, or global war on drugs. But this time, those justifications don't work. Here is why. If drugs is the real problem, why there is no such action against Mexico? Most of the illegal drugs entering to United States do not come from Venezuela, it comes through Mexican cartels. Yet there is no regime capture, no military operation, no global campaign. If dictatorship is the problem, where does Saudi Arabia lie? Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy. There is no national election, political dissent is crushed. Yet it remains America's closest allies because Saudi Arabia sells its oil in dollar. It fits the American strategic interest. If crime against humanity is the real problem, where does North Korea lie? Kim Jong-un ran one of the most brutal regime on this planet. But instead of regime change or isolation, US President meet him across table. The pattern becomes clear. Dictatorship was never the red line. Human rights was never the red line. Drugs was never the red line. Interest was and is. Now consider Venezuela. Drug trade didn't start yesterday. It has existed for decades. Yet only now it has become narco-terrorism. Why? Because Venezuela moved closer to America's two biggest rivals, China and Russia. That is when language changed, that is when urgency appeared, and that is when interventions became necessary. For the years, critics of US foreign policy were dismissed. They were called conspiracy theorists. They were called anti-Americans. They were told that America intervenes only for humanitarian reasons. Yes, America do humanitarian act, but for those who were paying close attention, it was never the full story. It was always about oil, it was always about dominance, and the rest was marketing. But even then there was a justification, a story to sell intervention. Now the story is gone. We attacked Venezuela, we need Greenland, we need strategic control.
Policy question. How much money are you thinking of giving people in Greenland to get them on board with a possible U.S.
I'm not talking about money for Greenland yet. I might talk about that, but right now we are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not.
New this morning, President Trump just said the United States needs Greenland and that anything less than total control is unacceptable. The question is, what is he willing to do about it? Given that the Prime Minister of Greenland says he does not want to be part of the United States, the people of Greenland do not want to be part of the United States, according to opinion polls. So the president just wrote that Greenland is, quote, vital for the golden dome that we are building and that NATO would be far more formidable and effective with Greenland in the hands of the United States. And then he said that anything less than that is unacceptable.
So the question is no longer about Venezuela. The real question is, what does this mean for the world? There is a famous quote from ancient Greek historian Thucydides. The strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. This was the law of jungle. No limits, no boundaries. That is why colonization happened. That is why resources were exploited. That is why weaker nations were crushed. But after Second World War, something changed. The world tried to replace the law of jungle with the rule of law. United Nations were created. International norms were established. Sovereignty was supposed to matter. But the rules exist only when they are respected. And without compliance, international rules becomes meaningless. That is why Secretary General of United Nations called Venezuela oppression deeply concerning, not because of the Venezuela alone, but the kind of precedent it sets. And he is right. In 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Vladimir Putin was labeled as a war criminal, a threat to international order, a danger to humanity, and the language still returns every time the war escalates. But when United States captured Nicolas Maduro, the sitting president of sovereign country, he was a good leader or bad leader, that can be a separate debate, the reaction was very different. Apart from Denmark and few other countries, most of the Europe remained silent. No mass condemnation, no sanctions yet, and that silence matters. Now imagine tomorrow Russia captures Ukraine president. Would it be shocking? Yes. But would it be unprecedented? Not anymore. Because the logic already exists. United States says Venezuelan government was illegitimate. It was influenced by foreign powers. It posed a strategic threat. Russia already makes the same claim. Russia says Ukraine government is illegitimate. It is controlled by foreign powers. Ukraine threatens the Russian security. If US can decide who is legitimate, if US can decide what is threat, if US can do oppression and act without international backing, what exactly will stop Russia? And the same logic applies for China. For the years, the United States defended Taiwan using the language of democracy, but that defense no longer holds. If powers and resource extractions are the real rules of the game, then the Taiwan becomes something else entirely. Not a democracy to defend, but a strategic asset. Taiwan produces world's most advanced semiconductors, which is irreplaceable in the global supply chain. So what would stop China doing exactly what US has just normalized? Nothing except power. And the most dangerous part of all this, it won't be the big nation who will suffer first, it will be the smaller nation. Watching, learning and realizing that international law protects only when it is convenient to the powerful. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next.